wonderful man. I think he's been treated very, very unfairly by the media, as I call it, the fake media in many cases.
That was President Trump defending the man that he fired as his national security advisor. But the Senate Judiciary Committee is asking the FBI and the Justice Department to brief them on Michael Flynn's contacts with Russia and the release of transcripts of those communications. Let's bring in a member of that committee, Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He's also the vice chair for the Senate Select Committee on Ethics. Senator, good morning.
Good morning, Allison.
What's a bigger deal, Michael Flynn's contact with the Russian ambassador or the leaks that told the media about it from the intel community?
Well, the credible allegations that the Trump campaign at the highest levels was in regular contact with Russian intelligence are the big deal here. And it's striking that President Trump is now criticizing what he calls the fake media for having attacked a man he just fired, a man he fired for lying to him, or to be more concise, a man he fired weeks after he knew he lied to him, but only fired him after it became clear in the press that he had lied to the vice president and implicitly the president. I encourage the Senate Judiciary Committee on a bipartisan basis is going ahead to find out exactly what's behind General Flynn's contacts with Russian intelligence.
Let's talk about that, because I know that you all had an emergency, Senate Democrats had an emergency meeting to try to figure out what to do about this. Your Republican colleagues don't seem that inclined, some of them, in the House, to investigate the substance of the allegations of the connections between the Trump team and Russia. They're more interested in figuring out who's leaking. So what do you do as a Democrat?
That's right, Allison. As you just heard in the previous interview, you've got House committee leaders who found the time to have 12, 13, 14 hearings into the incidents in Benghazi, but don't seem interested at all in a Russian attack on our democracy through a concerted campaign of contacting the Trump campaign, getting and leaking information from the Clinton campaign, and directly undermining our democracy. That's very concerning. In the Senate, I am hopeful that the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is proceeding on a bipartisan basis, will get access to all the relevant information, all the recordings of conversations and emails, and move forward to thoroughly investigate this. I'm on the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee, both of which have Republican chairs who have indicated a willingness to pursue this issue where it goes in the interest of national security and defending our constitutional order, and I'm encouraged by that.
You know, we understand from the media that the people who have seen the transcripts think that they're sort of inconclusive, that there isn't a smoking gun, that you don't hear Michael Flynn say, yes, when we get into the White House, we will ease sanctions. It's just not that unequivocal. It's not that clear. So if it's something vague, like the Russian ambassador says, we want to talk about sanctions coming up, and he says, we'll get to that, then where do you go?
Well, I think Michael Flynn ought to be called to testify in front of committees of Congress. Frankly, there's a lot of information here. There's a lot of emails and of conversations, and I'm not going to comment on the specifics of the transcripts that you're referring to.
Have you
but
seen
I'll simply
those?
say that I think there's a lot to look at here, and I think it's important that we proceed in a deliberate and thorough way. That's why I think it's important that General Flynn testify.
You sound like you know something. Have you seen some transcripts?
I haven't seen the transcripts.
You've heard about the transcripts.
I think it's important that we have General Flynn testify because there's a lot of information here, Allison. And I think it's misleading for folks to cite just one transcript of one conversation when, in fact, there's a large body of data here.
Okay, so what does that mean? So if there's a large body of data, connect the dots for me. The Trump administration's relationship with Russia is what?
Well, that's exactly the question we need to get to the bottom of. It's interesting and important here, not just what the current Trump administration relationship with Russia is and will be, and whether that complicates our national security, but what relationship the Trump campaign had with senior levels of the Russian government and of Russian intelligence officials. It's publicly reported in many sources that 4 senior Trump campaign officials were already under investigation by the FBI. And I think we need to let that investigation go where it goes. And we then need to make sure on a bipartisan basis in Congress that whatever complicating relationship President Trump may have with Russia does not impact our national security. So I was encouraged that a bipartisan bill that's called Restraining Russia's Aggression, Senate Bill 94, now has 20 co-sponsors, both Republicans and Democrats, including Republicans and Democrats in leadership. And it is a show of bipartisan concern about complicating relationships between President Trump and Russia. Certainly one of the areas throughout the course of the campaign and in the first few weeks of this tumultuous Trump administration that have caused real concern for our allies in Europe is Mr. Trump's puzzling and repeated statements of praise for Vladimir Putin, who is a thug and an autocrat who's murdered journalists and his political opponents and invaded neighboring countries, and we now know sought to undermine our democracy directly.
So why doesn't Congressman Jason Chaffetz want to look into it?
That's a great question, Allison. And I think President Trump, rather than attacking the real news, such as CNN, and rather trying to change the subject to who did or didn't leak what, should be calling on his allies in Congress to fully investigate this matter. President Trump and Vice President Pence ought to be coming clean and directly addressing this matter so that we can all move on, or so that it can be appropriately resolved and addressed.
Senator Chris Coons, please come back when you have any more information to share with us.
Thank you, Allison.
Thanks for being on New Day. Chris.
It's interesting. It's so fact sensitive, and yes, we need